So before we begin this video, I need to explain something. I originally was going to make this video because I want to talk about the season before I went on break. That didn't happen. So I decided that I would still keep this work right here. So for the most part of this video, you're going to see my thoughts with the opening first 8 chapters of Volume 8. I still think it's interesting to talk about there, but please note that there will be some outdated information. Don't worry though, after seeing the other half, well, let's just say, I managed to write up about another 10 pages of script for that. Spoilers ahead. Okay, let's not waste time. I'm MangaKamen. Hi, I'm the guy that RWBY fandom loves to hate and would probably like to do pretty much that. But I'm not unreasonable, guys. I like to think that despite my criticisms and obvious dislike of the direction the show was going, I don't mind it if people like what I don't like. And I like to think that just because I'm being negative, that we can at least respect each other's opinions, right? Or we could just spend the next 20 minutes ripping each other's teeth out with a chainsaw. To be fair, I know the volume isn't over yet. We still have the untamed half of RWBY to get through, but considering that I have a lot of problems with the volume thus far, and since I got nothing better to do, I figured I'd talk about the issues that I have with the series as much. And please, remember, I'm just giving my opinion. Most of what I do is for the sake of comedy as well. Okay, so let's start this off strong with one of the biggest complaints I have, and that would be Cinder Fall.
No! God, please, no! 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 No!
One of the most common complaints that RWBY gets is that we didn't have a solid base on the villain that has gotten the most screen time, Cinder. And originally, I was gonna make this video basically talking about her backstory. It's that bad in my opinion. But before that, I think it's important to stress that even though we have a backstory, I personally believe that it's a little too late. We're about 8 volumes into the series, and only now do we get any sort of backstory and insight to Cinder. Let me put it like this. Throughout the series, we see Cinder do some of the worst things imaginable. Killing Pura, causing something that could be akin to mass genocide, and having up a scene that didn't need to be hammed up. Characters like this, while can be a bit dull, especially when you consider that something in their past must have pushed them into this path of darkness. However, what doesn't help is that we got the backstory of other villains in the show that were introduced after Cinder. Dr. Watts, Tyrion, Hans, hell, even Salem got an entire sequence dedicated to her. But Cinder? 8 volumes in, and we finally get to see what makes her tick, and wouldn't you know it, she's always been mad. Also, side note, apparently Cinder's 10 years old at the start of this flashback, but her model gives me JoJo vibes for some reason. Rooster Teeth really needs to work on their kid models.
My name is Dib Membrane. I'm 12 years old.
Look, there are a lot of problems with Cinder's backstory. One of the major ones is the ship that sailed. I know I brought this up already, but I want to expand upon it. Because volumes 4 and 5 were arguably the best time for her backstory, since we had more of a focus on Cinder. But in volume 8, this comes off as nothing more than padding. What does this actually add to the story? Why do we need this information? How does this actually explain why Cinder is like the way she is? Because frankly, having been turned into what is essentially a slave, you'd figure that she'd have some sort of compassion for, oh, I don't know, the Faunus? You know, the race of people who are oppressed in the world of RWBY? Oh, I'm not saying she needed to learn compassion, but how exactly did Cinder develop from her backstory? Throw in the fact that I don't care for her as a character and you got yourself a recipe for Dullsville.
Do the dishes, clean the floor, do it, bow, 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 bow.
So let's talk about the backstory itself. Let's assume that I actually care about this character. And try to give the backstory an actual chance. Cinder being raised as a slave? Okay, fine. Cinder being abused? That makes sense. But then we get to Rhodes. This yuppie. Yeah, I'm glad you're dead. So let's break it down. Rhodes, a huntsman, sees Cinder essentially being worked to death, breaking whatever child labor laws there are, and even if it wasn't the case, you'd think a huntsman, a guardian of peace, would have an issue with this.
Then we've got about 7 years.
For what?
To train you for the huntsman exam.
Or he'll do something completely stupid. He doesn't try to sneak her out of the hotel. Instead, he lets her continue to live through abuse while training her in secret. Despite the fact that he's a huntsman and the stepmother only seems to be a hotel owner, by all accounts, he should not be afraid of her, and in fact should probably be getting the authorities involved to investigate Cinder's abuse. I mean, it's not like Cinder will snap and kill. Oh.
Fucked up, man. Fucked up. Everyone died because of you.
You'd think in those 7 years that a bond would have been made, but we don't really see that. Or at the very least, it's the bare minimum with the head patting. You'd think there'd be other roads for Rhodes to take. Like reporting child labor laws.
Controversial labor forces.
Or even helping the kid. And please, don't at me with the he did try. Look, if it's not shown in the show, it doesn't count. Guess we're gonna have to wait for like a comic book to actually show this. Yay! Oh yeah, tell a 10-year-old kid that they'll have to endure this kind of torture for years. That's a smart thing to do. I'm glad this character is dead. Like, this is so stupid. Speaking of stupidity, the whole reaction to seeing Cinder kill her foster family was a bit low on the IQ chart as well.
I don't want to have to run now.
That's all you'll ever do.
So, instead of trying to calm down Cinder, someone who has at least developed some sort of trust in you, Rhodes decides to outright attack her.
Why?
It's weak enough that we don't see anything if Cinder just murdered her adoptive family or if it was done in self-defense. But then this yuppie comes in and draws his weapons on the girl who was being abused this whole time. Like, oh my god, this is so stupid. Can we also talk about the music choice in the background?
Clean the linens, sweep the floors, shut your mouth and do your chores. Scrub the dishes in the sink. No one said that you should think.
Like, yeesh, I can tell that the writers really wanted there to be sympathetic backstory for Cinder, but come on, that's way too on the nose.
No one said that you should think.
This is a case where if they had just done an instrumental with that montage, it'd still get the same point across. I know for a fact that the writers have a problem with show don't tell, but the lyrics here are completely going against that notion. Like, all you're doing is having the singer doing the telling in a song that is grossly unsubtle. Might as well put a clown nose on my face and act like, hey, what's that on your nose? And the thing is, I know that there's going to be a counter argument to this. Since while on its own, the backstory could work, but as some people would bring up, it's supposed to be a parallel as how Salem treats Cinder, as well as showing that Cinder isn't as powerful or as in charge as she thinks she is. There's a problem with that though. It's already been established in the show multiple times that Cinder isn't all she's made up to be. We see multiple times that Cinder has failed, that she sucks as a villain. This pretty much is retreading the same ground again and again. The thing is, with a backstory like this, it's supposed to inform the protagonist that the bad guys were human too, that they have flaws, and that it can even take a single person to ruin the life of another. However, the main cast, hell, even the other bad guys may not even have a clue about Cinder's past. So, it's just for the benefit of the audience, which is terrible writing in that regard. Especially when you consider that Cinder acts exactly like the person who tortured her as a child. We don't even see her develop the logic or goal of wanting power because she had accomplished what she set out to do, to be free. Why does she want more power? Because she has to run?
I am so confused.
Maybe there's something going on in my brain right now, but we've never seen anything close like that in the series happening. I also didn't really care for the callback to Cinderella. Again, way too on the nose. Especially considering that a lot of the other characters don't actually have backstories that are related to their source material. I don't know, it just rings really hollow with me. So, I've made abundantly clear in my past videos that I believe RWBY doesn't have the best track record when it comes to things like semblances, facts, or sometimes even logic. Despite what people may tell you, continuity is important. It's supposed to make sure that the writers don't overstep bounds unless it's necessary to do so for dramatic effect. An example being semblances and aura. Now, I've gone on record that throughout the show's history that the show has been playing pretty fast and loose with the rules of semblances, and I still maintain that opinion. Only now I have a bit more to complain about. Yay! Negative man likes to be negative.
All you ever do is complain.
Like, now apparently semblances can evolve?
You don't really believe that. You are furious about losing Clover, and you miss him.
Well, I've got a lot to say about that scene. If funny enough, while I'm okay with the idea of semblances evolving, I do wish there was this thing called set up. Like, maybe in previous volumes we have a scene where someone explains that semblances have the uncanny ability to change or such with the user in their life. Something that My Hero Academia did. At best, what we had before was Harriet saying that Ruby's semblance isn't just speed, meaning that she didn't understand her own semblance, which... Great job, writers! Way to make Ruby even worse than her before by making her seem more incompetent.
Did Penny just figure that out before you did?
Actually, now that I think about it, why do we need such a detailed explanation, especially when most of the other semblances are made vague so the audience doesn't go, "What has science done?" Going back a couple volumes, there's the Maria fight, where she was able to use her semblance even though her aura was broken. And we're talking about Volume 8 here, and to a lesser extent Volume 7, since that's in tandem, if you ask me, that there's other issues with continuity.
What would you need to launch Amity now?
We made decent progress on construction and fuel collection. All potentially manageable, but, Amity was designed so that it couldn't launch itself without first being granted clearance from General Ironwood's tone.
You said in your speech that Amity Tower was ready to launch. You just said that to lure out Watts.
Not good at a lot of memory-related things.
Do I really need to point out how this is bad? I do. Look, if it was so easy to set this up, why in the world wouldn't Ironwood just say to these kids that they don't know what they're talking about? I understand at this point that they broke his trust and he wouldn't want to speak up, but I don't know, it just seems more appropriate that if you got a bunch of whiny kids who are trying to lecture you about this sort of thing, that you drop the bombshell just so they really don't understand the situation. And I'm not sure if this falls under continuity, but...
That's why you lost against Team RWBY. You try to fight how you feel about each other, so you'll never truly work as a team.
Shut when you think about it. Calm down.
Elm was beaten because she let her emotions out and allowed negative commentary to make her lash out. Harriet was so focused on going after Ruby that she did not help any other teammates. This could have been justified if Harriet brought up how fast she is and setting up the idea that she has some sort of obsession with being the fastest. If Marrow used his semblance effectively, then it would have been a 4v1 with all the Aesops against Ruby. If the battle was getting dicey, then the Aesop should have been improvised to overcome this obstacle. And Vine? Well, he was there. He would have been perfect fighter against Yang due to his semblance.
Big, meaty claws!
I find this hilarious that the idea they tried to push is that not being friends means that you can't have great teamwork. That to me makes no sense. I've worked with groups with people I don't like, but that doesn't stop me from working effectively with them. This idea of trying to explain why the Aesop's lost is just trying to respond to the criticism that was levied against the fight. Hell, Elm and Vine actually worked together in that fight.
Things are not that simple.
Jack and I threatened his life.
Look, I'm gonna be clear, there's a lot wrong with how the Aesops versus RWBY fight went. Stuff like how the Aesops apparently flipped personalities, the fact they seem to do stupid things, like how Marrow didn't use his semblance right at the start to stop the fight, or how Vine couldn't have used his power to re-grab Blake after Elm did what she did, but decided it wouldn't be worth it. Look, what I'm saying is, a lot of this fight was BS, but the Aesops didn't lose because of a lack of teamwork. Hell, the only teamwork that Ruby and Weiss had was Ruby knock back a single attack, pose, and head out, and Weiss sniping in a victory from Ruby. Blake and Yang had good teamwork, but having defeated their foes, they didn't go help the others. Look, saying the Aesops lost because of the whole not being friends is just dumb. Not having great teamwork? Oh yeah, that's why when they fought against the Geist in Volume 7 and Penny in this volume, they were actually pretty effective. I'm not asking for much, I'm just asking that the writers actually remember what they put in the show. Alright, this video's been way too negative. I've been trying to become more positive with my content lately, and it's time that I talk about some positive stuff in RWBY. I mean, I like the talking Grim. Sure, the design could easily use some work. It's not all that creative, but a talking Grim? Well, that's pretty cool, and something that even I wanted to see since the intellectual Grim would be fun. Especially since it could do some fun things like use tools or use a hostage.
3, 2, 1, go!
It's too bad it's muddled by stupidity.
Who threw this at me?
So not only are Yang, Ren, and Jean trying to fight this thing on top of these hover bikes or whatever, which severely limit their mobility and attacking ability, but whenever the Grimm uses Oscar as a shield against one of them, none of them try to attack from the other angles.
Wait! It's using Oscar as a shield!
There's even a point where Yang has a clear shot at the damn thing's back while it's using Oscar as a shield against Ren. What the hell are you doing? Punch it! Kick it! Bite its ass! Do something! Well, that didn't stop Ren from hitting it. Now, you may be saying that I'm nitpicking. Okay.
I disagree.
But maybe you're right. But you can't defend the fact that when the damn thing was transforming, these three did nothing!
Nothing! Absolutely nothing!
It doesn't even have Oscar in its hands anymore when it's transforming, and the three are just watching it sprout wings. I don't care if the group was in shock of this. Their friend is in danger and they're doing nothing. Shoot the damn thing! Clobber it! Break its legs! The Grimm drops Oscar, so it's no longer able to use him as a shield. It goes through this slow, painful transformation that visibly leaves it helpless. It sprouts paper-thin, delicate wings, slowly rears back, and spreads them to show them off. And the team, half of whom have precision-ranged weapons, don't think to do anything at all with it?
No one said that you should think.
Also, can I say that this is really, really dumb? Like the whole Oscar thing. At the end of last volume, there was no way to know if Salem was going to be able to get to him first before Team RWBY. But that idea was immediately shot down with RWBY somehow finding him in the first episode. Well, glad all that tension was made for nothing. They could have avoided the question of how did the group find him, and why does John's team suddenly suck if the Hound had just ambushed him when he was alone in the Faunus camp. Wait, what was this video's chapter called? Right, positives. I like Fiora, the sheep girl. I think her semblance is pretty cool. Oh wait, that was actually going to belong to Roman Torchwick, who didn't have a semblance. I may not be a fan of Robin, but I'm glad that some of her fellow huntresses are at least getting some development.
Until needed me. And to the marigolds. That meant I wasn't their son anymore.
Although this does have the issue that... Screw it! Change the title! This is stuff that irks me, but didn't have enough weight to be put into a specific section. Like, I'm glad there's actual character development for side characters, but the fact of the matter is there are way too many characters in this damn show. And this has been a problem with the series for quite a while. Let me break it down. We've got Team RWBY, 4 people. Team Jean, 3 people. Oscar and Co, that's 4 people. Ironwood and his crew, 6. The Prisoners, 4. The Happy Huntresses, 4. The Villains, 7. The Schnee family, 2. Now if my math is right, that's at least 33 to 34 people. And that's just the characters who have names and speaking roles. I'm not saying it's impossible to have a large cast of characters, but much like the show we've seen in the past, the show has a tendency to make superfluous characters, and it really hurts the show in my humble opinion. You know, there's a real fun thought experiment, and one you probably heard before. The Fat Man problem. If you haven't heard of it, give me a sec to explain, and I'll explain how it ties into RWBY. And no, this isn't about that one RWBY critic with the luxurious beard. This isn't a jab at him. I'm sorry to disappoint. Basically, the Fat Man problem states that you are crossing a flyover and you meet a fat man on it. You don't know this person. Under the flyover, there's a railway and the train is coming. However, there are some workers on the railway. Both you and the Fat Man realize in horror that the train must have some issue or the driver can't see the workers on the railway in time. In fact, 100% the train will run over the workers. Said workers are doing noisy work, so there's no chance they hear the train coming. Too long didn't watch. If nobody does anything, the workers will all die.
Any more bright ideas?
However, you realize that the Fat Man is indeed very fat and heavy. If you were to throw him under the bridge and onto the railway, the train would probably stop, and you're 100% sure that this would work. But the Fat Man will die. The Fat Man's no hero, and he's obviously not thinking about doing this. This is your idea only. Both the Fat Man and the workers are strangers to you. So what will you do? Do Do you kill the fat man to save the workers? Or do you just can't do it and let the workers die? Now, if you have any idea on how this translates to RWBY, this idea sounds familiar with what started up in Volume 7 and into Volume 8. Salem, the big bad of the series with the really stupid hair, get that off your frickin' head already, is flying into Atlas airspace with a huge whale Grimm, an army of Grimm at the ready, and some very terrible fashion sense that seems to be spreading amongst the entire crew. Ironwood is the person on the flyway and realizes that there's no way to save everyone with the amount of time that they have, and thus his plan was to have the city of Atlas fly up and out of Salem's path, and leave Mantle behind, because if he doesn't, he'll likely lose both. Now, why is this a problem? It's because of how the writers wrote this entire situation. Normally when it comes to these kinds of decisions, we like to see the heroes overcome the impossible odds. The best example that comes to mind is Age of Ultron, with the heroes attempting to stop Ultron from dropping that huge rock onto the Earth. We, as the viewers, love these kinds of heroes because they're willing to go against the odds to save people. It's honorable. However, it's also stupid. There's a few problems and concerns with that with Team RWBY. The thing is, they didn't have an actual plan. They need to save everyone. That's it. But there's no actual thought put behind it. Meanwhile, Ironwood is sacrificing Mantle to save Atlas, and the world to some extent. Because if Salem gets her hands on the spear that allows Atlas to float, the world's gonna be doomed.
Many months later.
In pursuit of a new world, no cost is too great.
That was probably pretty dumb, huh?
Remember, during this time, Ironwood had both the spear and lamp. In order to prevent Salem and her lackeys from getting their hands on them, this was the best plan to work. Let me make this clear. My issue isn't with RWBY and the gang wanting to save everyone. It's noble, it's heroic, and with whatever little character RWBY has, it works with her. No, my issue is that the writers have already decided that Team RWBY is right, and Ironwood is wrong, and this is proven with a certain scene. This is kind of what the writers do with villains who basically get more sympathy than they were expecting. They basically had to turn them into creeps. RWBY's plan was to throw bodies at the Grimm and hope it works. Ironwood, like them, knows Salem can't be killed. As far as they know, unless Maria suddenly wears a turtle shell and teaches them the Maguba. So he is trying to save at least some people in a losing battle. Does it suck? Yes, but Ironwood has a point. And why would he trust RWBY if they were only lying to him and betrayed his trust? Why believe their plan when it boils down to throw your soldiers at the army of Grimm and the immortal demon queen? And the worst part about this, there's no nuance in the writing. Team RWBY's shown to be in the right with this, or at least that's how it's being portrayed in the writing. It's something that I've noticed that the fandom likes to point out, as if Ironwood was choosing Atlas because he thinks Atlas is superior, and RWBY is choosing Mantle because they're poor and downtrodden. Although, side tangent, in this part of the volume in Volume 8, she doesn't really seem to care about Mantle at the moment, but whatever. But Ironwood wasn't saving Atlas. He was attempting to save the Winter Maiden and the 2 relics that were safe and secure on Atlas at the time, because making sure those 3 targets don't fall into Salem's hands was the best chance for all of Remnant. Goodbye to whatever nuance there was in this plot. RWBY's automatically in the right, which leads me to my biggest issue with the series as a whole.
And the general, he said people were going to die because of me.
That was a lie. And he was only saying it to hurt you.
I really hate these characters, and it's sad I have to say that because I liked these characters at one point. I mean, not all of them were great, and Ruby Rose was essentially a cardboard cutout of your typical anime protagonist, but at the very least, I didn't disagree with how they went about things, and the worst offender of this would have to be Ruby herself. I talked about how last year I disagreed with the logic that Ruby had by lying to Ironwood. I could see where she was coming from, but I still disagree with the aftermath as well as the execution of how this was handled.
I am so sick of secrets.
Really, Nora? Yet you didn't seem to raise a stink when you and the group decided to keep secrets from Ironwood. The biggest issue I had was the lack of consequences that Team RWBY faced. And when I say that, I'm not referring to cutting themselves off of Atlas and Ironwood. That is a consequence. No, when I say a lack of consequences, it's that the group really didn't actually learn anything in this situation. RWBY being the worst. Instead of actually learning that her actions have consequences, or learning that perhaps acting like the guy who lied to them all this time, and whom everyone had an issue with a few volumes back, wasn't the best idea to follow after. But instead of any sort of reflection on her actions, RWBY gets worse, to the point where she's actually going against the idea of helping Mantle, in even this scene.
That was a lie. and he was only saying it to hurt you.
I wouldn't say that this is full-on gaslighting, because her goal isn't manipulation, but it's really disgusting in my opinion since it was RWBY and the group who pretty much added fuel to this entire fire situation. Like, I've never been a fan of Ruby Rose's character development, mainly because the writers had for some reason made John the main character in the first few volumes, and Ruby Rose was pushed to the side despite being the fact she's arguably the lead since the show is essentially named after her. It was only in recent volumes that Ruby was able to get a character, but to me it comes off as extremely rushed, and as such, the writers only had one way to make the people go against Ironwood because a lot of people could sympathize with him, and that was to make him unhinged. Alright. Good job! Woo! Still don't like Ruby, and I don't agree with what she did and that she didn't learn from her mistakes. I also expressed in my last Ruby video that Yang and Blake were terrible for basically trusting Robin Hill, even though they didn't know anything about Robin other than political propaganda. They didn't know if they could trust this person, and considering that the entire crutch of Yang's arc in Volume 4 was...
Why should we believe any of this?
Now you're catching on. So far you've done nothing but accept what others tell you. But you need to question everything.
How about new?
I found it amazing that these two were willing to trust Robin right off the bat. I get trying to get Robin's side of the story, but that's not what happened. They immediately trust her. But that's last volume. Let's talk about this one.
Ruby, when we came here, we said we'd follow your lead. But things haven't exactly worked out.
Oh! Conflict among the party? Sweet! I mean, it's a little clunky with how Ruby wanted to save Mantle last volume, and it's kinda dumb to be arguing about splitting up since both jobs are important and splitting up isn't all that bad of an idea, but it's a positive, and I'm willing to take it. So how long until the sauce hits the...
Do you think she thinks less of me? For not helping out with Amity?
Ruby is your sister. She's always going to love you, even if you disagree with each other.
Yeah. Ruby.
Oh. Lovely. Look, cards on the table, no hyperbole. This is me actually talking to you people. I'm not a huge fan of shipping, but if you guys like it, more power to you. My issue with this particular scene is that there was barely anything to this conflict. We had this set up with Yang and Ruby arguing as sisters and having actual disagreeing amongst the group, which is something that we desperately need since, funnily enough, throughout the show, Yang and Ruby have had a lack of actual interactivity. Sure, you had some times where they talked to each other, but it was really hard for me to name a few times where the two interacted as a meaningful way. The best one I can think of while I typed that last sentence is when Yang got back with Ruby in Volume 5, and it's mainly because the volume was devoid of anything that was actual substance. And we had some decent conflict between his sisters, and it's just thrown away. Okay, getting back into character. Okay, let's see, Blake. There's barely anything there.
I don't know if you can hear me, but I need you, Ruby. We all need you. You're my only hope. Please, get up.
You guys remember when Blake could go toe-to-toe with Roman Torchwick without issue? If this was the Hound, then maybe I could understand, but not just some stubby grub when we've seen Blake use her semblance a lot better and more intelligently and is clearly faster than this. Now that I think about it, it's kind of weird that Blake went with Ruby's group. I mean, Mantle's got all those faunest in it. You'd figure that the girl who's only faunest in the group would maybe care about her people who are basically left to die. I don't know, it just seems kind of weird to me. Pretty much the only character of the main cast that's decent is Weiss, and that's barely saying anything since, well...
Please don't forget about your brother. Whitley wants nothing to do with me. Of course not. You left him alone. With us.
And what does Weiss do when she sees her brother again?
Go to your room.
Hell, Whitley got more character development. He actually grew to care about what was happening and called a doctor. By the way, Crow and Robin, yeah, they're still terrible.
Believe it or not, I know a little of what that's like. When people are worried you're gonna sniff out their secrets, they tend to push you away. It makes a real connection difficult.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
I'm sorry, but you can't make me like this character by giving her a sappy backstory. If you couldn't get me to like her with her voice actress...
A road trip. I remember when I was a child, Father...
This sure as hell ain't gonna do the trick. But you know what's funny about this? I'm not against this idea, her semblance being a problem for her, but this is not the route it should have gone, at least in my humble opinion. Robin should have been distrustful of others, acting as paranoia fuel for her. It would work because that's actually been an established trait with her.
If Ironwood wants me, he'll have to send more than a couple of kids.
Let me put it like this. If you have the power to be an instant lie detector, the absolute truth from them, it has a bit of an after effect. It makes you think you're entitled to the truth, which makes it harder to trust other people. If someone doesn't want to submit to Robin's power, she couldn't trust them. And this is something that we've seen be established in Volume 7 with her, like when she didn't trust Blake or Yang, and when she didn't trust Ironwood. But instead of saying that Robin is distrustful because of her semblance, the show attempts to act like she's a tragic character because people didn't trust her? Hello? Anyone in there? Miles? What's going on in that head of yours?
Roll all the way down there. What did you drop? What did you lose?
Did we forget last season where Yang and Blake automatically trusted Robin and her semblance was public knowledge? Remember? So people know about her semblance and abilities and still trusted her. Not to mention, it's not like Robin's semblance is passive. There's a specific circumstance in order to make it work. She has to be touching someone and asking them a question. Robin's semblance would only be a problem if she were to try to interrogate someone in the first place accidentally. Which, to be honest, you're not asking to be liked by someone you meet the first time when you grab them and start playing 20 fucking questions. And Crow?
Maybe you could be around somebody, anybody, without my semblance making it complicated. And now, it just feels like a childish dream. Gone. Like everybody.
No, yeah, that was totally your semblance's fault.
We can kill the man who put us here.
Or was it Ironwood's fault? Make up your mind, damn it! So, I'm gonna make this clear. I'm pretty sure there's a decent chance with the remaining episodes for the show to come out that I may have to eat some crow with these points I have. And no, not that kind of crow. You perverts! As most of you who are watching this probably already know, but for the sake of that one guy in the back, I'll explain it. For this volume, it's been a split with the rest of the episodes coming out later in the first or second quarter of 2021. Considering everything that has happened in 2020, I can't say that I blame Rooster Teeth for this. But considering that I still have issues with this volume up to this point, I don't even know it's even worth watching anymore. And here's the thing. I hate that I have to say that. I actually liked the concept of RWBY when it first came out. I liked the characters. I was interested in the world. Sure, there were a lot of problems with the show, but I'm willing to look past those kinds of mistakes because this was a learning experience. The problem here is the learning experience has been going on for almost 8 years at this point. Rooster Teeth isn't exactly what I'd call a small company anymore, and not that their success is inherently a bad thing, but I've noticed a bit of deterioration in their work. It doesn't seem to have that nebulous spark that captivated me in their earlier days, and how the roughness of their work is a part of that charm that drew me into their style of humor. I want to like RWBY. I really want to enjoy the series, but I can't. Not at the rate it's going. But here I am, time and time again, giving it a chance. That either says something about how I want the potential of the series to be fulfilled, or I'm some sort of loser on the internet. And contrary to what people believe, I'm not going out trying to find issues with the show. I'm genuinely giving the show a chance. Then again, I'm obviously a loser on the internet since I spent about 17 pages worth of my time to complain about a show that'll probably net me a ton of lovers and haters of this kind of thing. Oh well. 'Tis life, and hey, I'll still pay attention to what RWBY has to do, and I still get a little glimmer of hope that the series may be good again. But hey, that's just one guy's opinion on the net. What's yours? Let me know down below in the comments. Have a nice day.
Many months later.
Not blame me! I have sacrificed everything!
No! You have sacrificed everyone else!
I wouldn't do that if I were you. I mean, unless you're hoping to add more metal to that body of yours. All right, now, where did they put them? What?
You have sacrificed everyone else!
Trust Rooster Teeth to make me think this has gone even worse. Let's talk about my issues with the latter half of this volume. I'm not gonna go over everything, but trust me, boys and girls, I've got some stuff to say. In this corner, we have your sworn enemy Emerald, a character who helped murder Penny and attempted to destroy a city for an unclear but impure motives. She helped murder the innocent Fire Maiden, Oz, Pyrrha, and countless others. She has shown zero sign of remorse, and all her regret is fear for her own life now that she realizes she's in danger.
What? No.
Her power is trickery, and has been able to use this power specifically to fool people, most notably our main cast. She's also the person who led to Yang being ostracized. And in the other corner, we have General Ironwood, an upright man who has the good of everyone in his heart. He attempted to protect the previous city with an army of robots at no charge. He gave one of the protagonists an arm for free, no questions asked. He also defended Weiss when she was going to attack noble snobs and stand by her, earned the loyalty of Weiss's sister Winter, and thus has both direct and indirect connections with the entire main cast except Blake. He works hard to gain your trust and support you with actual concrete plans that explain all his actions. And yet, in the span of one episode, they decided to trust Emerald! Come on, Rooster Teeth, you can't have your main cast trust a bad guy instantly after having this entire plot be because they didn't trust a good guy. He deserves this! Yeah! Ironwood deserved to be lied to. Have people whom he trusted and helped unconditionally go behind his back and actually made the situation a lot worse because these bratty teens who seem to think they know more than the actual adults.
Trust is at risk.
What? No, legit, I get it. Trust is a risk. And I get that. It's a good message. But it's really stupid that these characters now get to basically talk about trust when they were the ones who violated Ironwood's and basically pushed him to the edge in this regard. And this wouldn't have been an issue if they didn't already know this lesson from Volume 6. You know, the whole trusting Ozpin? You know how that was a big deal for the group? This just makes the entire cast of RWBY being nothing more than hypocrites.
Oh, there's a big surprise!
Especially when they're willing to give that trust that apparently they were unable to give Ironwood to Emerald, someone they know for a goddamn fact was willing to fight them and kill them! And I know that some people are going to say in response to this, they're learning from their mistakes. Are you referring to the cast of RWBY or the writers? Both! That is not an excuse, especially when the writing goes out of its way to ignore what's been established. You see, there's this little thing called context.
But you need to question everything.
Not my fault I can't say no.
Yang and Co. need to learn to question people.
Bullshit. Look, we are trusting you.
Why? Yet, they don't feel the need to question a person they've never met and immediately trust her with private information.
You're trusting others, but you're making sure they prove themselves first.
Despite the fact that Ironwood has done so much for the crew before Volume 7. Not to mention, throughout Volume 7, you've got the cast prodding Ironwood and chastising his decisions.
Well, if it wasn't for the embargo making everybody so mad, people probably wouldn't be so quick to blame you for everything else.
And not bothering to come up with an alternative solution to what's happening. It's fine to criticize. It's fine to do so, but when you don't offer anything in return, especially for a situation like this, you're just making the situation worse. If Team RWBY were to learn from their mistakes, then they would have recognized how much in the wrong they were. They would have tried contacting Ironwood to see if they could have solved this peacefully. And as we see in Volume 8, the Schnee Dust Company was able to send flying vehicles to Mantle to help people get out. Why was this not an option back in Volume 7? That while Atlas goes up into Stratosphere or whatever, that the ships come down and evacuate Mantle. Hell, take them to another country, for crying out loud. What's even the point of this? Why is this a conflict here? There's an even more egregious example of trust, and it's about Winter, especially when it comes to Ironwood. When it comes to these two, it was established early on that Winter was grateful for Ironwood for taking her under his wing, especially considering the home life that Winter had to deal with. And yet, Winter does nothing to try to help Ironwood. You know, the man she was loyal to the man she admired, someone she's worked with years, and maybe saw as a replacement father figure considering the circumstances?
You have sacrificed everyone else.
Gotta make Ironwood crazy, despite the fact that if it wasn't for the main cast's actions, a lot of the situation wouldn't have gotten this bad. Let's talk for a minute about death.
My name is Grimmy, and I've come to reap your immortal soul.
I know I've made a whole video talking about it, but I think it's important to bring up here.
Are you okay? Do hugs always make you feel this warm?
12 seconds later.
Well, that was completely pointless. But back to characters who weren't slathered in death flags and were forced to lose their agency for the sake of shock. Yang. Oh boy.
Change the world. My final message. Goodbye.
Now, I want to make it clear that when this happened with Yang, I knew for a fact that Rooster Teeth wouldn't kill off one of their main characters. Even made a tweet to prove that. Because I know the writings of Mr. Luna and Shawcross, because it's Yang. Yang's death is due to an absurd level of convenience and inconsistency, even for RWBY's standards. Yang's aura broke in one strike. She lost consciousness. Lake is the only one to react in this regard. Neither RWBY nor Weiss tried to save her, even though their semblances could have been able to do that more easily than what Blank attempted, and her death doesn't activate RWBY's silver eyes. That last one is terrible because the writers seem to forget that RWBY's eyes can activate at her command, as last volume demonstrated. I know someone's gonna say, oh, Yang's aura was weakened because she didn't get any rest, and I'm like, nice headcanon, bro. Actually, now that I think about it, there are a lot of questions other than these ones about this situation. I know we're talking about death, but I got nowhere else to put this and it's not going to take long, so, like, why didn't the RWBY crew remember that Cinder and Watts are out there? They kind of forgot that sort of thing. Why didn't Penny and the staff go through the portal? They are arguably the most important things to get away from Salem, and I get that Penny wouldn't want to leave her friends behind, but throw the staff through the door! Why would you keep it with you? Speaking of, why didn't the Happy Huntresses help with the fighting? They were there. Speaking of the portals, why did they need this deep, dark pit that people would fall through? Why not have it be like the doors that for the vaults that just opens up the gates to vacuo? You know, kind of like how in the MCU when they were fighting Thanos, they had like these huge portals that showed up out of nowhere and allowed the people to come through. In fact, here's a good question. Why would you have the doors be covered in white and prevent people from seeing inside or seeing outside?
Hope that we've thought of everything.
Well, clearly you did not. You wanna know why the cast of RWBY suddenly act like they're drinking way too much alcohol for their liver and brains? Plot. It's all for the plot, baby. Now back to your regularly scheduled rant. You know, even at this point, even though we've seen that Watts and Ironwood being the thralls of death, I don't really trust RWBY anymore with their death characters. Hell, look at Cinder. The character was thought to be dead at the end of Volume 5, frozen and falling down to who knows how far. At this point, unless I see a dead body, I don't believe that these characters are dead. It's gotten that bad for me, at least. The writers of the show have really made me distrustful when it comes to the tool that is death. And I suppose we should talk about the big elephant in the room, Penny. After getting beaten up in various battles, infected with a virus, being dehumanized, having her agency stripped by her friends and enemies regardless of intention by said allies, the writers decided that 15 minutes after becoming human, that she should be rooted by Cinder, and in her critical state... Yeah. Maybe I'm reading too much into this. That's totally a possibility on my end, and I'm willing to admit that outright. But we need to consider the mindset with the maiden powers. With how things are set up, the writing gives the impression that Penny was replaceable. Hell, Winter ended up with the maiden powers anyway, and she was the original candidate. This seems kind of dumb, and now she's technically a part of Winter. Penny will never be able to be her own person ever again. Now, some people can see that as a terrible irony, others can see it as something a bit heavy-handed. Myself, I'm more into the camp that it was a bit too much, especially for a character they brought back last volume, allowed to become human, and then subsequently kill her off with only 2 episodes later of doing that. If you ask me, that's a bit much. Personally, I feel this wasn't satisfying for Penny's arc. Then again, I'm a person who thinks her arc is a bit too messy, especially since her entire character arc is made moot because of the decisions in the writing. After all, throughout most of volumes 7 and 8, her own agency was a major focus, as well as despite being a machine, she still had an aura and was considered a real person. Yeah, let's throw out all that build up and make her a real human body and slit her throat afterwards. What could go wrong? Now, don't get me wrong, the death itself in a vacuum can work in writing, but I feel that the writers were trying a bit too much to put everything but the kitchen sink into this character arc, and it just comes off a bit too much to me.
I'm tired of your yapping. You never try to make things better.
I'm gonna say this, there are a lot of problems that I have with RWBY, but I'm not really in the mood to make a whole length movie about it. But let's go with one of the biggest issues I have with the entire series, and that's with the main protagonist-centric view. It's when the main cast in a show is shown to be in the right when it comes to situations. It's supposed to be firm foundation for our main characters that are set in their ways, and it's not necessarily a bad thing in writing. However, with RWBY, there's a bit of an issue with this. I think we can all agree that our main crux of volumes 7 and 8 is that it's a fight between both RWBY and Ironwood's ideologies, and to see whose methodology for saving the situation that they're in. Ironwood is prioritizing Atlas, the Winter Maiden, and the Staff of Creation. Meanwhile, RWBY is trying to save Atlas and Mantle. Both ideas have their merit. After all, the heroes of the story don't want to sacrifice Mantle and its people just to save some others, and Ironwood doesn't want to risk having Salem getting her hands on the relic that she's after. Both have their pros, cons, and weaknesses. However, the issue comes with how the show only displays that RWBY is in the right. There are two reasons that I'm given that they are in the right as follows. The first is that leaving people to die is wrong. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying people should die like that. But considering that the alternative is the end of the world, a certain quote comes to mind.
The needs of the many outweigh
the needs of the few.
Or the one.
Is it cold? Yes. Is it callous? Yes. Is it something I agree with? Hell no, I do not agree with it. But sometimes, these sacrifices need to be made, and I'm sorry if you don't like that, but choices like that do need to be considered. The only other reason is that the writers are going out of their way to make Ironwood to be a maniac. And this is something that they seem to do a lot of, where characters who oppose Team RWBY's mindset are shown to be, you know, a bit more interesting, nuanced, but then they become degenerate or degrade into insanity. Because here's the thing, not once did Team RWBY try to argue that Ironwood's in the wrong. They just say he is because he's leaving Mantle to die. But if you follow Ironwood's logic, it's either that or allow Salem to kill everyone in the world. The problem is, this situation could have been resolved rather easily had Team RWBY not been idiots, especially from what we see in this volume. Oh! The Schnee Dust Company has freighters that can be piloted remotely? Why not load up as many people on them and take them to a country far away? They could have suggested that. Weiss and Winter should have known this information, but apparently they just forgot it. Oh, and the Staff of Creation can make portals that teleport an entire nation away? Oh, boy. I think my biggest issue is no one attempted to evacuate the people until Whitley has this idea. Our protagonist didn't do anything to help the people. Whitley did. The show inadvertently makes me like the character more than the main cast. That's not something that you should do. RWBY should have proven to me that Ironwood's methods are wrong, but instead the show has someone else showing proof that Team RWBY is correct. That saving everyone is in the right. And in order to do that, they basically had to make Ironwood into a maniac. They removed any sort of moral dilemma by having Ironwood basically want to bomb Mantle. Gee, it's not like making a deal with Ironwood could have stopped this from happening, and it's not like they couldn't have contacted Winter about this. Hell, you could have even had Winter say this: if you let us use the company airships to evacuate Mantle, we'll work with you to protect the Staff of Creation. How hard would that have been to do? What's even worse, the way Team RWBY solves the problem with the magical MacGuffin. Yeah, so much for trying to have a nuanced conversation, or trying to stay connected and not be divided because of Salem. Seriously, this was so convoluted, and the only reason why Team RWBY was in the right was because of a magical charm that apparently is so broken, it breaks people's logical membranes. Hell, this is literally Deus Ex Machina, a god out of the machine to fix the problem. Well, We're here again. Let's be honest, anyone can take up the title of critic and make a video or vlog post about anything they want and slap it up there. Some people like to take that title and proclaim that they know exactly how things work, and how some people can spend hours on end telling you how something is great or something is terrible and the creators deserve to burn! I personally don't agree with that mindset. I'm not someone who thinks that his opinions are better than anyone else's. All I am is a guy who likes to watch random stuff, make videos, and share his opinion. If you disagree with what I say, that's perfectly fine. I don't hold that against anyone. The only thing I don't agree with is when people misrepresent me, and trust me, there are people who do that all the time. My thoughts on a show or game or whatever aren't any more relevant than some schmuck who just puts as much effort into an image board post. In this case, I think RWBY has gotten so bad despite the potential that it has. And if you disagree with me, that's fine. I'll just think that you're less human. Just joking.
No one said that you should think